What's up, guys and gals? Me, Mutahar. While the internet's rife with drama right now, apparently, I wanted to just really talk about things that I was kind of reading on the internet. So I know how we talked about video games causing violence and shit, but today I wanted to talk about video games, specifically first-person shooters, rather, or shooters in general, causing brain damage to people, ladies and gentlemen. So I was reading a couple articles, and one of these came out from the University of Montreal, which, you know, it's from Canada, so, you know, shooting out to our educational institutions, you know, for doing this kind of research. But apparently it seems like these guys took about, I would say, almost 100 so people, you know, and basically put them into two camps. Essentially, they would play 90 hours of games like Call of Duty, Killzone, Borderlands 2, and then they would play 3D versions of Super Mario. And basically they found out that the group that played games like Call of Duty ended up reducing segments of their hippocampus, which, you know, basically the caudate nucleus or whatever, starts to lose cells at that point if you play too many of these shooters. Essentially, what happens is your brain gets on autopilot. But what they did was they ended up giving the other group that played games like Super Mario, and it increased their hippocampus there. It basically increased brain activity and, I guess, the longevity and the health of their brain. Now, this topic is kind of interesting because it's something new that kicked off, and it's interesting to see that this kind of stuff has actually become something of a investigative feat, you know, because video games have become really, really popular. Obviously, video games are not a niche thing anymore. I think everybody and their mother starts to play video games, whether it's playing it on, you know, the PC, PS4, Xbox One, all the way down to playing Farmville on their, you know, iPhones or something, to the point where, I gotta say, everyone to an extent games a little bit, you know, whatever category you want to type in. If you're playing League of Angels, you're a gamer. If you're playing, you know, LA Noire, you're a gamer. If you're playing Watch Dogs 2, you're a gamer. If you're playing Call of Duty, you're a gamer. Simple as that. But I wanted to read this up because it was kind of interesting seeing how they performed their research, and for the most part, it's actually not wrong. You know, the whole topic about people being dumbed down after playing so much Call of Duty and Destiny actually starts to prove itself a little bit, to be honest, which I sort of called it coming, and at the same time, I sort of agree with it. Now, to me, I kind of compare this to people that watch a lot of television lately. You know, people that watch TV, if you ever notice the addiction to television when they're watching, like, the lowest of the low show. Not like, you know, shows like documentaries or maybe TV series where you sort of have to apply your brain a little bit, but people that just watch the bottom barrel of shows, and essentially they just sit there in front of their television screen soaking this, like, show up to the point where they just sit there and stare at their screen like they're almost dead corpses, to be honest. And that's the whole topic of being an autopilot. You know, if you're playing a game like Call of Duty, something that doesn't really challenge your brain, you're just sort of sitting there rotting away, letting your muscular memory really do most of the work. And I've honestly personally felt it myself. You know, I used to play shooters a lot. Nowadays I've switched my games to essentially third-person games, adventure games, puzzle games, RPGs. And when I used to be heavy into shooters, you know, things like Call of Duty, Battlefield, all that kind of stuff, I would also feel that level of sitting there and letting my fingers do most of the work. Now, I think there is some overlap and some mistakes sort of done in this kind of research, and I don't really attribute it to anything anyways. You know, this is one of those first case researches on something like this, so I expect them to take this introductory glance to it and not really apply all the checks and balances to this kind of stuff. You know, first-person shooters, obviously nowadays first-person games are pretty popular to the point where it almost feels like every game, no matter what genre, it ends up being a first-person game. You know, first-person puzzlers, first-person horror games, first-person shooters, you know, first-person simulators, first-person anything is sort of the most popular thing anyways. Heck, one of the games that I really started to get into, Danganronpa, could kind of be called somewhat of a first-person, you know, digital novel, I guess you could say. First person is a viewpoint that's used anywhere you can, so I think just attributing even shooters to that category ends up being wrong. You know, nowadays the shooters that I play are Rainbow Six Siege, Battlefield 4, you know, whenever I feel like, to an extent, or PlayerUnknown's Battleground. And I gotta say, to an extent, those shooters I wouldn't really put in the same vein as Call of Duty or Halo or Killzone, because to an extent you do have to think while you're playing a game like Siege, for example. I don't have to explain to you, but it's a competitive shooter, and to an extent every match is different. There's a lot of teamwork involved and a lot of analysis and keeping your brain in check and focusing on what's going on. There is very little autopilot to be handled over there. You are essentially playing each second as if it was your last in a game like that, even Counter-Strike or any other game that really falls into the competitive shooter strategy. Now, you can include MOBA games to that list, all that kind of stuff, games that make you think. Now, it's interesting to see that people who are playing games like Super Mario, I assume 64, Galaxy, all those kind of games, the 3D Super Mario titles, which are pretty puzzle heavy to an extent. You know, they're relying on exploration, relying on figuring puzzles. Those are the games that people are building their brain power on, and there's no shock to that. I think people who are engaging their mental powers while they're playing a game like Super Mario, definitely are going to be in the more healthy brain category if you're gonna do a test like this. Now, to an extent, it does sort of rely on people who are sort of doing things such as spatial and episodic memory. You know, it sort of is this comparison between how people sort of work playing a game like Super Mario to an extent. Like, are they remembering sort of elements in scenery, or are they remembering, like, you know, where to make a left, where to make a right, all that kind of good stuff. Now, I sort of think you can apply this to games like Portal as well, even though that's a first-person shooter or first-person game. It's obviously a puzzler, you know, a game like Portal, a game like, I think even like BioShock or Half-Life, which might be a shooter, but it does require a certain level of human rational thinking and exploration and puzzle solving to actually get through. So I think this is more of something like puzzlers versus games that are just so easy to the point where you don't really even have to have input. And we've reached a point where games are easy like that. If you play a lot of shooters nowadays, or a lot of games that are similar to the shooter category, I think I can even include a game like Assassin's Creed or even Watch Dogs 2. And don't get me wrong, I like Assassin's Creed and I like Watch Dogs, but I gotta say, if you take the Ubisoft form of approach for third-person games, even in their puzzler category, it almost feels like you are playing that Autopilot third-person game. Seriously, play a game like Watch Dogs 2 and find out just how much of it is checklist kind of stuff. You know, you roam around Watch Dogs 2's world and you'll find out that everything essentially boils down to a few solutions that you can go through, and sometimes I'm doing quests or missions in that game like I'm autopiloting myself through. Literally, it almost feels like that. So I think you can sort of redo this research with a little more variety in your games, and you know, you can't just attribute to the fact that 3D exploration games or puzzle type games are the only exception to that rule. You know, I think you can add any game that's usually easy versus challenging, and I'm kind of interested in seeing how this research sort of applies to something like, say, Game of War. For those of you who don't know what Game of War is, it's essentially tap, build, spend money, microtransaction. And I want to see what kind of an effect that really has on people too. You know, we've obviously looked at the idea of those games targeting people with severe gambling addictions, but I want to see just what those kind of games can do to somebody, like a game like Farmville to somebody who is investing time in it, but essentially playing that at the most autopilot of phases. You want to say Call of Duty doesn't make you think? Maybe I'll agree with you on the single player to an extent, but even then, you know, I think something like Farmville or Game of War or Mobile Strike or whatever game in that category is much more harmful than that shit even. And it also doesn't include the fact that what are they even playing on something like, say, Killzone or Call of Duty? Are they playing the multiplayer, or are they just playing the single player element? For people that have been playing 80 hours of these type of games, I want to believe that something like, say, the single player, which if you ever played a recent first-person shooter single player, hell, if you played anything past Call of Duty 4, you'll find out every single shooter game is essentially so generic to the point that playing it single player is something that I don't even do anymore. You know, I have not finished a first-person shooter campaign in years, ladies and gentlemen. I don't even think I finished it since the PlayStation 4 has come out. Battlefield 4 to this day still remains an unfinished game to me, even though I played hundreds of hours on it, just playing the multiplayer anyways. And to an extent, I do have to wonder how much of the multiplayer really affects people's brains to an intellectual level anyways. Because while I defended Siege, I can also defend Battlefield and even Call of Duty for that level of attention that it requires too. Seriously, play a match of Call of Duty. The fast-paced action in it does require a level of thought beyond its belief. The people who end up getting 20, 25, 30 kill streaks per round, you know, without camping, rushing, you know, playing that game with the utmost reflexes they've got, kind of play against this research anyways. But I just wanted to share it with you because it was interesting to me anyways. I really was interested in reading something like this, and look, I'm one of those people that is against, you know, people comparing video games to things that, you know, are just a shot in the dark, but this is stuff that makes sense. It's not just the University of Montreal pulling this stuff off, it's actually a lot of other big time research institutes in a lot of other countries that are sort of doing this research as well, and as gaming grows, I think this kind of stuff is going to get more and more popular. So I just wanted to ask you guys what you really thought about this. You know, take the focus away from things that have been going on recently on the YouTube front and just, well, online video content production in general, and sort of take a look at this side of gaming too, where it's more neuroscience related, and that's something that I really wanted to cover, you know, instead of looking at the faults of, I guess, Nintendo or whatever gaming company or ranting about microtransactions. It's sort of interesting to see where gaming was going and what other people are sort of analyzing about video games as well. Is Call of Duty literally making people fucking stupid? You know, I want to ask you what you think. Is that true in the comment section below? Read up on it. If there's any expert, let me know. Or do you think that this research needs to kind of be redone? Because I personally am in the camp that it needs to be expanded upon so we can actually figure out if these games, which we like to make fun of all the goddamn time, are actually turning people into fucking idiots. And whether we should just play games like Super Mario that are going to be coming out with the 3D puzzle-solving world that's in it, because at the end, those games end up making you smarter. You know, if people have things like Alzheimer's, people have like memory issues, is a game like Super Mario Odyssey going to increase, you know, if you keep playing games in that caliber, is it going to end up overcoming or at least helping people in some form of treatment plan with whatever illness they have? Or is playing, you know, the inverse of that going to cause them more issues? Let me know what you think in the comments section below. This has been another episode of, I would say, rant time. It's not really ranting, but it's just me more sharing something interesting with you guys. Let me know what you think. I really want to see where the discussion goes in the comment section below. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Just like it if you dislike it. This is me, Mudhar, and I am out.